Hello and welcome back to Rule the Game. In this video, I'll show you how to play Explorers of Navoria by Meng Chunlin, a game for 2 to 4 players, lasts about 20 minutes per player, and it's recommended starting at age 12. As usual, I'll show you first how to score points, then I'll show you how to play the game, then I'll give you some hints for your first game, and then I'll show you how to set up the game. And if you're new to the channel, please subscribe below. Rule the Game. In Explorers of Navoria, you continuously win victory points throughout the game, but also at the end of the game, there are a few end of the game goals that you will score points on. The victory mark tracker is right around the board. You all start at 0. Victory points in this game are shown by crowns. So there are crowns everywhere, as you can see on this board. They're here, they're there. They're also on cards. There are crowns everywhere. You can win crowns by taking cards. There are immediate bonuses on some of those cards that you can get. Then you can get crowns here if you later on place a token on this card. These up here are end of the game milestones. You'll also walk on tracks here where you get points for being the one who's furthest along in every single round. You'll also win some victory points by income that is on some of these cards here, and you also have some cards that give you end of the game scores. So it's a little bit of a point salad, and you'll understand better how to get the points once you actually see how the game's played. The person with the most points at the end of the game, of course, wins, and if there's a tie, then the players share the win. Explorers of Navoria is a turn-based game that is played in 3 rounds. The player guide card shows you the different phases of each round. In each round, there's a recruiting phase, a gather phase, an income phase, and a return phase. I will go through those different phases now step by step so that you see what can be done during those phases. The recruit phase will help us to gather cards from the left-hand side. The way it works is that the active player takes the bag with the different tokens. They shuffle it a little bit and they take out 2 tokens. The 2 tokens are placed in the village, and the active player now has to decide which of those 2 tokens that they just pulled they want to place on a deck here on the left-hand side, so it's matching in color, to gain a card from that deck, an open card. So let's say the player decides to take the blue card, which is one up here. You can decide which one of those 3 cards you want, and you pick it up. There's usually a direct bonus that you get. In this case here, it's these 2 crowns, and you'll take these 2 victory points that you have here. Yellow as the active player, so you get 2 victory points, and then you put those cards together as your own deck somewhere next to your player tableau, which is in my case over here. The board will not be refilled with new cards until the round has finished. Now for the second player, and the second player in the first round is in clockwise order. Afterwards, it's in order of points they had. You'll always see the order up here. So first is yellow, second is purple, and then comes green. For the second player, they now have a choice. To gain a card, they can now either take one of the tokens that is still in the village from before. That way they know what they're getting, or they can pull from the bag again. Should they pull from the bag, they can now only place one of the 2 tokens that they just pulled out of the bag. So let's say this player decides to take the red card. They pull a card here. The red cards are end of the game goals. These, they also take in their tableau, but nothing really happens because they don't have an immediate bonus. Now let's quickly have a look at the cards. So we just pulled a blue card before, this one here. And as you can see on each card, on the top, there is a symbol. There are 4 different symbols that you can have. You'll also actually find them up here. And usually cards give you an immediate bonus. In this case, that's the 2 victory points that I took before. And sometimes you have income, that's the C here. That's an income that's later in the round when we actually go into the income phase, and I'll explain it to you then. So the blue cards actually give you income that you can get in phase C. If you look at the pink cards usually give you also victory points immediately. They'll also give you here a boot with a symbol. The symbol always shows you which of the exploration tracks we're currently looking at. There are 3 exploration tracks. There's the mountains here, there's the desert here, and there's the forest here. If I have a boot with a forest, with a tree, then I'll move my marker here by 1. Of course, if you have 2 boots, like you see on this card, then you can move your marker by 2. Again here, you see a C, that is for phase C, the income phase. So you'll get some income here, which I'll show you later too. The red cards give you end of the game bonus, that's this symbol here. Otherwise, they don't do anything for you. So these I'll explain to you at the end of the game. The green cards, they give you resources. In this case, as you can see, 3 crystals. You always have the crystals on the side of the game. If you have this card and you take it, then you'll actually take 3 crystals from the supply, and you're now going to place these crystals on your player board. So if you have 3 crystals, you're going to now place them on the board, and you have 3 different docks here. They're corresponding to the different areas that you have, so the mountains, the desert, and also the forest down here. And whenever I pick up more than one of these icons, I'm going to have to distribute them on the different docks. So in this case, with 3, there's no other choice than actually placing them one by one on the different docks. We will see what happens here later, how you can actually use those different icons that you've collected. Now the last color is yellow. Yellow always lets you move around, or usually lets you move around and place trade posts. Here again, as before, we get a boot with the mountains. That means we're going to move our color here by 1 in the mountains. And over here, you have a trade post also in the mountains. And if you want to place trade posts, you always have to go to your player board, and you'll pick the topmost trade post of the corresponding symbol. So in this case, it's in the mountains. So we go here to the mountains. We'll take the topmost trade post and place it here on space 1. Later on, when you get to place more of the trade posts, you will then take the next one and you put it on 2, and the third one will go on 3. The same, of course, is the case for the desert and for the forest. Please note that you can also place a trading post here on any of these spaces, even if somebody else has already placed one there. Now, I've also pointed out that each card has a little symbol here up on top, and there are 4 different kinds. And you see up here on the milestone goals that you see these 4 different symbols. Once you've collected 5 of them, and you notice that here the red ones actually have 2 symbols on them, they count as 2 symbols. So once you've collected 5 of one icon, you'll take then the corresponding symbol here, and the marker is going to get put here on the 1 milestone goal card with the same symbol. And if I'm the first one, I'm going to go up here on top. It gives me special bonus at the end, and the second player will place theirs on the second spot. And if you're too late for that in a 3 or 4 player game, you will not get any points for this. Now, as you walk along the trails in the different areas, you'll see that there are different flags here on these different circles. We will look at them later in the income phase. However, should you ever be able, and this rarely happens, but it can happen, but should you be able to get to the end point of this trail, you'll automatically get the bonus that it says up here. In this case, 3 victory points. If you can walk further, if you have another step that you can do later in the mountains, then you'll get another 3 victory points, and so on. Now, the recruiting phase lasts until everybody has gotten 4 cards, or in the case of a 4-player game, it's 3 cards each that they have gotten. So let me pull some more tiles before we get into the next phase. Now that all players have gotten 4 cards in the recruit phase, we're going to move on to the gather phase. You'll see now that it looks a little bit like this. You're going to have some cards left. You also might have some of those tokens here in the village. I personally like to take out these extra tokens in the village here at the end of the recruit phase, because now we don't need them anymore, but for the gather phase, we only need all the tokens that are on the cards here. And now what happens in the gather phase is that we go in opposite order. The person who was last before will now go first. And what you do is you'll pick up any of those tiles that you have on here and you place them on the corresponding colors here on these fields. Usually you start on top. You can go wherever you want, but usually, of course, you start on top because the top always has the best reward that you get. So in this case, if I place it here, then I'll get 2 swords and I'll also get a boot. I can walk somewhere by 1. And here's a question mark, you see, so that I can actually walk wherever I want to go. Let me say I wanted to walk this one for whatever reason that may be. I also get the 2 swords. I'll take the 2 swords and I'll have to distribute them again. I'll put one here and I'll put one here. And we now actually see how this board is getting used. As you can see, we have here always a condition that needs to be fulfilled on the dock so that we can actually fulfill an order. In this case, here, you need to have 3 of one kind, either the swords or the crystals or the apples, to actually fulfill an order. In this case here, you would need to have 4 of any kind, so it's just a mixture of 4 icons that you have. And over here, you need to have 1 of each, so a sword, a crystal, and an apple. Once you have reached the condition, like I did over here, you'll take away all these swords, the 3 that I need to fulfill this condition. I'll put them back in the supply. And now I get to do the bonus action that you get whenever you've fulfilled an order. There's always a free bonus action here on the left for all the different kinds of areas. It always corresponds to the area. In this case, it's you walk 1 in the mountains. So I'll walk 1 here again in the mountains. And then you'll get per green card that you have, you get a victory point. I currently have only 1 green card over here. It's this one up here. So I can move my victory tracker by 1. And up here, because I've taken off a trading post, I can also get this victory point here. So I'll move 1 more. But here, because there's still trading posts on it, these 2 different bonuses are still blocked. I can't use them until I've played these 2 trading posts. So this is how you use that block. And you see that the bonuses are always slightly different for the 3 different regions, and you play on whichever actually works out for you. Please note that once you're able to fulfill an order on your player's board, you're going to have to do so immediately at the end of your turn. And then the second to last player will go. They'll also pick something. In this case, let's say this player picks this one. They get here 6 victory points, so we'll move that player by 6. And so it continues. As you may have noticed, I actually took the wrong color before. The first person should have been a green one, and then the purple afterwards instead of the yellow that I did. But I have the yellows here, which is why I did it that way. But again, to do the first phase, the recruiting phase, you go in this order, clockwise, and to gather, you go in counterclockwise where the last player, so in this case the green one, actually starts. You will see that what you gather is slightly different depending on the color. So for example, in pink, you might actually be able to place a trading post somewhere, or you can walk by 1 somewhere, or you can get whichever icon you want, or you either get an icon or you walk. You have for green, you have apples and whatever icon you want. And also over here for the brownish ones, you'll get crystals and victory points. Now this phase ends once all the tokens from over here have been placed somewhere here, which means everybody also had 4 turns on this in a 2 to 3 player game, or 3 turns in a 4 player game. So we're done with the gathering phase here. All the tokens have been distributed nicely. And so we're going to move on to the income phase. In the income phase, players have a look at their cards. Any cards that has a C on the bottom of it will actually score them something. So in case of this one, they will now score 1 victory point per icon like this one that they have on their cards. I have here 1, 2, 3 of those, so I'll get 3 victory points for this. This one down here means that I'm going to get a victory point for every single flag that I passed with my explorers on the board. I have passed 2 flags up here, no flag here, and just 1 flag over here. So in total 3 flags, I get 3 more victory points. Now, if you had been able to get a second card like these, now I have actually 2 cards that will give me bonus points for flags. And so here in this case, I would have gotten 2 points, 2 victory points per flag that I passed. In this case, 6 points. I was not able to gather it, so it was just 3 points. It's the same with these. They start multiplying if you have more than 1. So these are the 2 ways that you can actually get income. And then you also track who is furthest along on the paths. In this case up here, the yellow is furthest, and you see the first person here will get 3 victory points. 1, 2, 3. And in a 3 and 4 player game, the second player will get 2 victory points. So we give 2 to green here. And players who are here on the starting field will definitely not get any points, but in a 4 player game, the third person would also get 1 victory point. In case of a tie, so if 2 players here are on the same field, then they both gain, here in this case, first place, and then we skip second place and we go straight to third place afterwards for a 4 player game. And that's already the income phase. Next, we're going to go to the return phase. That's the cleanup phase before we start the next round. What happens here is that we'll take all the different tokens that we have here, we'll put them back in the bag. We'll shuffle the bag for later. We'll discard the cards that are left from the round before. They go in a discard pile. And then we pull 3 more new cards from here that we'll place right next to it. We will return the explorers to either the starting point of the track or to their furthest trade post that they have. So in this case up here, the green one has to go all the way to the start because they don't have a trade post. This one here goes to here because they have a trade post there. Down here, there's no trade post, so all of them have to go back to the starting point. And actually, should you have a trade post somewhere where your marker is behind, so if your marker is here at the starting point and you have a trade post here, you can actually even move your marker forward. And the last thing we do is that we change the turn order. And for this, we will place here the different icons here, these little birds. We'll place them in order of the victory points that we have. And actually, in this case, it remains the same because yellow is ahead of purple and then green. So we leave it the way it is, but that could, of course, change. And if 2 players were on the same number of victory points, then you just keep the order that they had before. This turn order will now be used for the full next round until we reshuffle this order. But again, remember, in the recruiter phase, we go this way, and gather phase goes the opposite way. So they both have advantages. And that's basically for a round. Again, you do the recruiting, placing tokens on here. You gather, putting the tokens back into these different spaces. And then you do the income phase where you check all your income cards. And then you'll do the return phase where you rechange the order. You check also where all these explorers have to stand. You put new cards out, and that's a round. After 3 rounds, the game's over. At that point, what you'll do is that you're going to check first in your cards if you have any of these end of the game cards, any end of the game scoring cards, which in this case says, I will get per trade post in the forest that I actually have down here, I will get 2 victory points. Also, this one can be accumulated, so if you have more than 1, you get actually more than 2 victory points for that. And the other end of the game scoring that you have is up here. If you have the favor, remember those are the ones where once you have 5 of the same icons on your cards, then you can place these favor markers up here. And if you've placed some of those, then you get, here in this case, 2 victory points for each yellow and pink card that I have. In my case, I only have this 1 pink card, so I would actually get 2 victory points for this card. But remember, I only have 4 cards currently. If you play 3 rounds, you're going to have 3 times 4 cards in a 2 or 3 player game, so you're actually going to have 12 points right here. And that's it. Whoever has the most points wins. And here are some hints for the first game. There are lots of things you can do here. There are lots of things that look like they might give you lots of points, and they do. You just have to do them in the right combination. What always gives you a lot of points is if you start combining the cards with the right symbol with income for the right symbol, because at the end of every single round there's an income phase, and if you have a lot of those, this combination gives you lots of points. Because you're also going to pick cards that will match you then, and so you just keep multiplying the victory points that you have here. It's the same with the flags. Here you're going to have to make sure that you actually walk properly with your explorers, but if you can walk far with your explorers because you have lots of the shoes, or you have actually placed a bunch of trading posts which always put you ahead of some of the flags, in that case you'll get victory points from that every single income phase too. Having the trading post otherwise, having these cards here, I don't think it's that valuable. You can get here at the most 6 victory points per card. Unless you have 2 of those, then it's 12, which is good again. The advantage of these cards mostly is that they actually have 2 icons up here, which will help you to get on these favor cards up here. And there are quite a few points that you can gather up there if you have the right combination of coloring cards. Green is just a lot of fun because you get to play over here and you get to get all these orders together and you get extra turns and it feels very good. Can also give you lots of points. As you see on the player board, you see that in each different area, you can get more points per green card. So if you gather a lot of green cards and you can keep playing the board here, you will also get a lot of points from getting victory points every single time that you then can fulfill an order. However, that only works if you've also placed your trading posts, because as I explained before, this scoring option will only get available once this trading post has been played. As long as it sits here, you don't get any victory points. And that's why you probably need the yellow cards if you play the green cards, because the yellow cards let you play all these trading posts. Playing trading posts is difficult because the only way to do it is to do it with these yellow cards or by placing here this pink token in the gathering phase. Now, I would suggest to you anyway, if you're the first one who gets to play the gathering phase, you should definitely place a trading post somewhere. That's, in my opinion, the best option that you have in the gathering phase. There's one more thing that we've seen, and that's you can play different strategies and you can win those strategies with those strategies. But what you also have to do is you have to watch out what the others are doing, because you're probably going to have to actually do sometimes something that they won't like. Otherwise, they gather too many points. If you let a person do the income part here too much because you're focused on down here only, you're probably going to lose because that person is going to get a ton of points. If 2 people battle up here for income and one person plays alone down here, they will win the game because nobody actually competed with them. So you always have to make sure that you don't let somebody get away too much with one of their strategies. And that's Explorers of Navoria. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, please subscribe. And up next, how to set up the game. To set up the game, you place the board in the middle of your table. You'll then shuffle the decks of the different cards. They need to be separated, of course, by color. And you place them in the right spaces that you have here. And you put 3 cards face up on the left-hand side of them. You'll then randomly pick 4 of these favor tiles here, you place them randomly up here on the 4 fields that you have. And in case of a 2-player game, one of those tiles is actually blank. You'll place it randomly somewhere on this board. The other tiles here, the favorite tiles that you have in the game, you don't really need. Then you take all these tokens here, you put them in the bag. In case of a 2-player game, only put 2 of each color, otherwise you put all 3 of them. You'll make sure that the supply of crystals, apples, and swords is next to the game board. You'll then place the victory markers of each player here on the 0. Each player also has these favor markers that they'll keep by themselves. You'll place here the starting markers for the different players on here 1, 2, 3. In this case, it's clockwise order on the table. You'll then place the explorers of each player on the starting space of each track that you have here. And finally, every player gets a board, a player board, where you place their color of trading posts on these 3 fields that you have here per color. So in total, 9 trading posts that you have. And then the players, of course, take their player boards in front of them. And now we're ready to go.